They were 38 and 9 years old, a single mother and her daughter, sleeping in the back seat of a 2008 Ford Focus behind a Walmart in Tacoma, Washington, when the letter arrived about a cabin in Montana. Sarah Mitchell's siblings laughed when they heard, called it a worthless shack in the middle of nowhere, told her to sign it over so someone competent could handle the sale. But when Sarah and Lily walked through the door of that log cabin and discovered what lay hidden beneath the stone floor in an underground vault untouched for 30 years, they found something worth $265 million. And the family that had betrayed them, that had stolen everything and abandoned them both, would never see a single cent. The morning light came gray and cold through the Ford's windows, condensation beating on the inside of the glass where their breath had fogged it during the night. Lily woke first, 9 years old with tangled brown hair and a stuffed rabbit clutched against her chest. The same rabbit she'd had since she was 3, back when they still lived in an apartment with heat and running water and a refrigerator that actually worked. She sat up carefully, trying not to wake her mother, who lay curled in the driver's seat, and pulled her notebook from the backpack that served as her pillow. The pages were filled with drawings of houses, always houses, some with gardens and swing sets, some with wags in the yard, all of them with 3 stick figures holding hands in front of the door. She added another today, sketching in colored pencil while the Walmart parking lot slowly came to life around them. Early shift workers arriving, delivery trucks backing up to the loading dock. The world moving forward while they stayed frozen in place. She added windows with curtains, a chimney with smoke curling up, tried to make it look warm and safe and permanent. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it, had gotten good at ignoring it, knew they'd share a granola bar and a dollar coffee from the gas station, and that would have to be enough until the free lunch program at school. The other kids had started to notice her clothes. The same 3 outfits rotated endlessly, the shoes with the worn soles, the way she never brought snacks or had money for the book fare. Her teacher, Mrs. Patterson, had pulled Sarah aside last week with that look, that careful concern that meant she was worried, that maybe she'd have to call someone, that maybe living in a car wasn't adequate care for a child. They went through their morning routine with the efficiency of practice, Sarah heating water in a camping kettle plugged into the car's cigarette lighter, using baby wipes to clean their faces and hands, helping Lily change into her school clothes while trying to maintain some semblance of privacy in the parking lot. A granola bar split in half, Lily getting the bigger piece though she didn't know it. Coffee so weak it was barely brown, but at least it was hot. The school bus stop was 3 blocks away, close enough that Sarah could walk Lily there and still make it back to the library before it opened, where she could use the computers to search for jobs that never seemed to materialize, applications that disappeared into the void, interviews that went well until they asked about her current living situation, and she had to decide whether to lie or tell the truth that would disqualify her. Lily shouldered her worn backpack, the zipper broken on one side and held together with a safety pin, and looked up at her mother with those serious dark eyes that seemed too old for a 9-year-old face. "Mom, Jessica asked if she could come over to our house after school." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. "Oh, sweetie, I told her we were moving soon, that our house is all packed up in boxes." Lily's voice stayed steady, matter of fact, a child who'd learned to lie to protect her mother's pride. "I said maybe after we get settled in the new place." Sarah knelt down on the sidewalk, her scrubs from her last nursing job 2 years ago threadbare at the knees, and pulled Lily into a hug that threatened to break her. "Baby, I'm so sorry. This isn't forever. I'm going to fix this." "I know, Mom." Lily hugged her back, small arms fierce and loyal. "We've had worse, right? Remember when the car broke down in Portland and we had to sleep in the bus station?" They had indeed had worse, though the fact that a 9-year-old could rank their various states of homelessness made Sarah want to scream. She walked Lily to the bus stop, watched her climb aboard with the other children who had homes to go to, lunches packed in proper lunchboxes, parents who weren't one car breakdown away from complete disaster. Then she walked back to the Ford Focus, sat in the driver's seat, and allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to cry before she had to pull herself together and face another day of trying to claw their way back to stability. The library didn't open for another hour, so Sarah drove to St. Mary's Women's Shelter on the east side, the same shelter where she'd fled 10 years ago with infant Lily in her arms, running from an ex-husband whose fists came out when he drank, which was every night. Sister Maria still ran the place, 70 years old now, but still sharp, still kind, and she told Sarah she could use the shelter's address for mail, since a P.O. box cost money they didn't have, and no employer wanted to send correspondence to a Walmart parking lot. The morning was cold enough that Sarah's breath plumed white as she walked up the steps, past women she recognized from the rotation of desperation that kept cycling people through this place. Some who'd been here when she'd been here a decade ago, still stuck. Sister Maria looked up from the intake desk and smiled, the lines around her eyes deepening. "Sarah, good morning. There's a letter for you, came yesterday. Looks official." The envelope was cream-colored, thick paper stock that felt expensive between Sarah's fingers, addressed in elegant script to Sarah Mitchell, care of St. Mary's Shelter, Tacoma, Washington. The return address read Finch and Associates, Attorneys at Law, Helena, Montana. Her first thought was that someone was suing her, that somehow she owed money she didn't know about, that the situation was about to get even worse. She opened it, standing right there in the shelter lobby, Sister Maria pretending to be busy with paperwork but clearly curious, and began to read. "Dear Ms. Mitchell, we are writing to inform you that you have been named as the sole beneficiary in the estate of Nathan James Mitchell, your late great-uncle. Mr. Mitchell passed away 6 months ago at the age of 89. His estate has been finalized, and per his explicit instructions, his property located in Jefferson County, Montana is to be transferred to you and your daughter upon completion of all legal requirements. The property consists of a log cabin structure on 43 acres of forested land with mountain access. There are no outstanding debts, liens, or encumbrances of any kind. The property is free and clear. Mr. Mitchell also left a fund to cover your travel expenses should you wish to inspect the property before making any decisions regarding its future. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange transfer of the deed and discuss next steps." Sarah read the letter 3 times, her hands starting to shake, before the words actually penetrated. Nathan Mitchell. She tried to place the name, dug through memories of family gatherings she'd mostly tried to forget, and came up with a vague impression of an older man at her father's funeral, standing in the back of the church, not speaking to anyone. Maybe she'd met him one other time, her father's uncle, someone who'd moved out west decades ago and never came back. The letter included a check for $1,500 made out to Sarah Mitchell, travel expenses, and she stared at it like it might disappear if she looked away. "Sarah?" Sister Maria's voice pulled her back to the present. "Is everything all right?" "My great-uncle died. He left me property, a cabin in Montana." The words sounded absurd coming out of her mouth. "I don't even remember him." Sister Maria came around the desk and read over her shoulder, her hand coming to rest on Sarah's arm. "This is from God, child. This is your chance." Sarah wanted to believe that, wanted to let hope in, but she'd learned that hope was dangerous when you were barely surviving. It could be nothing, a shack with no plumbing, a trailer falling apart in the woods. Or it could be a home. Sister Maria squeezed her arm. "You won't know unless you go." The thought formed slowly, taking shape against all her instincts toward caution and self-protection. Montana, 43 acres, a cabin. Maybe falling apart, maybe worthless. But maybe, just maybe, a place where Lily could have her own room, where they wouldn't wake up to parking lot security knocking on the window, where Sarah could stop lying about why they couldn't have friends over. The check in her hand represented more money than she'd had at one time in 2 years. Enough for gas, enough to get there and maybe get back if it turned out to be nothing. She called the number on the letterhead from Sister Maria's office phone, her voice steadying as she explained who she was. Yes, she'd received the letter. Yes, she wanted to accept the inheritance. The attorney, Harold Finch, had a kind voice roughened by age, and he told her that Nathan had been very specific, that the property was to go to Sarah Mitchell and her daughter, no one else, that everything was in order, that she just needed to come sign the papers and the cabin would be hers. No mortgage. No property taxes for 50 years. Nathan had prepaid them through some kind of trust. Free and clear. Sarah hung up the phone and looked at Sister Maria, and for the first time in months, maybe years, allowed herself to feel something that might have been hope. I think we're moving to Montana. The hard part came next. She'd told her siblings about the letter before she'd really thought it through, still operating under the delusion that family meant something, that blood counted for more than it had proven to. She called her older sister Rebecca from the payphone outside the library, Lily at school, the Ford parked in the shade where it wouldn't get too hot inside. Rebecca answered on the fifth ring, her voice already impatient, already annoyed. Sarah, what is it? I'm showing a house in 20 minutes. Dad's uncle Nathan died. He left me property in Montana, a cabin and land. Sarah tried to keep her voice neutral, tried not to sound like she was asking for anything. The silence stretched long enough that Sarah thought the connection had dropped. Then Rebecca laughed, sharp and cutting. A cabin in Montana? Sarah, that's pathetic. You can't handle a studio apartment. You're going to manage property? Just sign it over to me. I'll handle the sale. We can split the money. The casual assumption that Sarah couldn't manage her own affairs, that Rebecca should automatically take control, sparked something hot and angry in Sarah's chest. It's not yours to handle. Nathan left it to me and Lily, specifically. Oh, for God's sake! Rebecca's voice went cold, the warmth she used with real estate clients evaporating. You're living in your car, Sarah. You're not exactly making great decisions. Someone needs to step in before you screw this up too. Kyle's voice in the background, muffled like Rebecca had her hand over the phone, then more clearly as she switched to speaker. Is that Sarah? What's she want now? She inherited some shack in Montana from Dad's weird uncle, thinks she's going to manage it herself. Rebecca's tone made it clear what she thought of that possibility. Kyle's laugh was even harsher than Rebecca's. Let me guess, you want money to get there? Another loan you won't pay back? The words hit like a slap. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone receiver. I don't want anything from you. I just thought you should know. How thoughtful. Emma's voice now, youngest sister, the one who'd borrowed $6,000 for a medical emergency that turned out to be a nose job. Honestly, Sarah, after everything we've done for you, everything you've done for me? Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. You took Dad's insurance money, all of you, said you'd pay me back, and then disappeared. Those were loans. Kyle's voice turned sharp. Not our fault you can't manage money. You got the same amount we did, and somehow you ended up homeless. That's on you. Sarah opened her mouth to respond, to point out that she'd given them her share on top of their own, that she'd believed them when they said family helped family, but a small voice interrupted, high and clear through the phone's speaker. You're mean. All of you are mean. Sarah's heart stopped. Lily. She'd forgotten that school let out early on Wednesdays, that Lily would be at the library where Sarah had said to meet her. She must have walked up during the conversation. Must have heard everything. Well, if it isn't the little tattletale, Rebecca's voice dripped false sweetness. Emma, you raised a brat. Lily's voice shook but didn't break. You took Grandpa's money. You promised to pay Mom back and you didn't. And now you want to take our cabin. The silence that followed was brittle and sharp. Then Rebecca, voice filled with contempt. Sarah, get control of your daughter and sign over the property. You're not equipped to handle this. Sarah hung up the phone, turned to find Lily standing 3 feet away, backpack slipping off one shoulder, tears streaming down her face but her jaw set with determination. She looked so much like Sarah's father in that moment, the same stubborn refusal to back down from what was right, that Sarah felt something crack open in her chest. I'm sorry, baby, you shouldn't have heard that. They're trying to take our cabin. Lily wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The one great Uncle Nathan left us. Are you going to let them? Sarah knelt down, there on the sidewalk outside the Tacoma Public Library, and took her daughter's face in her hands. No, I'm not going to let them. That cabin is ours. Nathan wanted us to have it, and we're going to drive to Montana and see it and make it our home if it's even remotely livable. Even if it's not very livable, Lily's voice was fierce despite the tears. Even if it needs work, we can fix things. You're good at fixing things. Sarah pulled her into a hug, this brave, loyal, impossibly strong little girl who'd never had a real childhood, who'd learned to lie about having a home and rank their various experiences of homelessness and defend her mother to adults who should have been protecting them both. You're right. We can fix things. You and me. That night in the Ford Focus, Lily couldn't sleep. She lay in the back seat, street lights painting orange stripes across the ceiling, and tried to imagine what Montana looked like. She checked out a book from the library about the different states, and the pictures of Montana showed mountains so tall they had snow on top, even in summer. Forests that went on forever. Sky so big and blue it didn't seem real. She thought about having her own room, about being able to invite Jessica over without having to lie, about her mom not looking so tired all the time. The cabin might be small, might be falling apart, but it would be theirs. Nobody could kick them out. Nobody could tell them to move along. Nobody could take it away. In the front seat, Sarah ran the numbers in her head for the 100th time. 1,500 for travel, minus gas. The Ford got decent mileage, but it was a 3-day drive, minus food, minus whatever they'd need when they got there. It would be tight. It would be terrifying. But staying here, sending out resumes that went nowhere, watching Lily get thinner and quieter, that was its own kind of terrifying. Nathan Mitchell, whoever he'd been, whatever his reasons, had thrown them a lifeline. The only question was whether Sarah was brave enough to grab it. Morning came too early, the Walmart parking lot coming to life around them with the pre-dawn shift change. Sarah and Lily went through their routine one last time in Tacoma, knowing it was the last time, that tonight they'd be somewhere in eastern Washington or Idaho, that in 3 days they'd be in Montana, standing in front of a cabin that might change everything or might be another disappointment in a long line of disappointments. They packed the Ford with everything they own, which didn't take long: clothes and garbage bags, Lily's school supplies, Sarah's nursing textbooks that she'd refused to sell no matter how desperate they got, photographs of Sarah's father holding infant Lily with so much love in his eyes it hurt to look at. The last thing Sarah packed was the letter from Harold Finch, folded carefully and placed in the glove compartment where she could reach it if she needed proof this was real. Lily sat in the back seat with her notebook open to a fresh page, ready to document their adventure. She'd titled it at the top in her careful printing, "The Journey to Our New Home." Below that, she'd drawn the Ford Focus with 2 stick figures visible through the windows and mountains in the distance. Sarah caught sight of it in the rearview mirror and had to blink away tears, this child's unshakable faith that things were about to get better, that they were heading towards something good instead of just running away from something bad. They drove out of Tacoma as the sun came up, Interstate 90 stretching east toward the mountains, toward Montana, toward whatever Nathan Mitchell had left them. Sarah's hands were steady on the wheel, but inside she felt like she was made of glass, one wrong move from shattering. Lily pressed her face to the window and watched Washington state scroll by, the landscape changing from urban sprawl to farmland to forest, her first real journey beyond the city limits of the place she'd been born. "Mom, do you think there will be bears?" "Maybe. Montana's pretty wild." "What about wolves?" "Probably those too." Lily's eyes went wide, delighted rather than scared. "That's so cool. We're going to live somewhere with actual wild animals." Sarah couldn't help but smile, her daughter's enthusiasm infectious despite everything. "We don't know what we're going to find there, baby. It might be really rough." "I don't care." Lily went back to her notebook, starting a new drawing. "Anything's better than the parking lot." They drove for hours, stopping only for ice and bathroom breaks and the cheapest food they could find. Sarah let Lily navigate with a paper map from a gas station, teaching her to read the highway numbers and calculate distances, turning necessity into a lesson the way she'd learned to do over the past 2 years. They crossed into Idaho as the sun started to set, found a rest stop with bathrooms and picnic tables, and ate peanut butter sandwiches Sarah had made that morning while Lily reported on their progress. "We went 312 miles today. Tomorrow we have to go about 400 more to get to Montana." Lily traced the route with her fingers, so serious and focused. "Then it's only about 2 hours from the border to Helena, where Mr. Finch's office is." "You're a good navigator, kid." Sarah watched the last light fade from the sky, stars coming out brighter than she'd ever seen them in the city. "Your grandpa would be proud." Lily looked up from the map, her face suddenly vulnerable. "Do you think he knew about Uncle Nathan leaving us the cabin?" "I don't know, baby. Maybe. They were family, so maybe they talked." "I think he knew." Lily folded the map carefully along its creases. I think that's why Uncle Nathan left it to us, because Grandpa told him we were good people. Sarah's throat tightened. Her father had died 18 months ago, cancer that moved too fast for treatment to matter, and in his final days he'd held her hand and told her she was the strongest person he knew, that she'd raised Lily right, that he was proud of her. She'd used his life insurance money, her share of the $17,000, to pay for his funeral and catch up on bills. Her siblings had taken theirs and run. She'd believed them when they said they needed it, that they'd pay her back, that family was supposed to help each other. She'd learned the hard way that belief was a luxury she couldn't afford. They slept in the Ford that night in the rest stop parking lot, semi-trucks idling nearby, the hum of the interstate never quite fading. Sarah woke 3 times from dreams where the cabin turned out to be a burned-out shell, where Harold Finch told her there'd been a mistake, where her siblings showed up with legal papers proving the property was theirs. Each time she woke, she checked the glove compartment to make sure the letter was still there, solid proof against her anxiety. The second day took them through the rest of Idaho and into Montana, and even Sarah, who'd been braced for disappointment, felt something shift when they crossed the state line. The sky opened up, impossibly wide and blue, mountains rising in the distance like something out of a storybook. The towns they passed through were small, real small, the kind of places where everyone probably knew everyone else's business, but they were clean and well kept, not the desperate urban decay of Tacoma's outskirts. Lily kept her face pressed to the window, making little sounds of amazement every time they rounded a curve and the landscape revealed something new. "Mom, look! That mountain has snow on the top. Those are the Rockies, baby. Some of them stay snowy all year round. Can we see them from our cabin? I don't know, maybe." Sarah didn't want to promise anything, couldn't bear the thought of disappointing her daughter again, but she let herself imagine it, just for a moment, waking up to mountains outside the window, air that smelled like fuel instead of exhaust, Lily running through actual woods instead of concrete parking lots. They reached Helena late in the afternoon of the third day, 3 days that had drained most of the $1,500 but had also been oddly peaceful, just the two of them in the road and the slowly changing landscape. Helena was bigger than Sarah had expected, an actual city nestled in a valley with mountains on all sides, buildings that looked like they'd been there since the gold rush days mixed with modern construction. She found Harold Finch's office on a side street downtown, a brick building with his name on a brass plaque by the door. Lily held Sarah's hand as they climbed the stairs to the second floor, both of them nervous, both trying not to show it. The office was small but neat, leather chairs in the waiting area, diplomas on the wall, a secretary who looked up and smiled when they entered. "You must be Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Finch is expecting you." Harold Finch was 70 if he was a day, with silver hair and a weathered face that had suggested he spent more time outdoors than behind a desk. He shook Sarah's hand with a firm grip, then knelt down to Lily's level and offered his hand to her too, treating her like she mattered, like she was part of this. "It's very good to meet you both. Nathan talked about you, you know, not often, but when he did, it was always with respect." Sarah tried to process that. "I only met him twice that I can remember. At my father's funeral and maybe once before that. Nathan was a private man, didn't much like crowds or conversation, but he paid attention to people. He saw things." Finch straightened up, gestured to the chairs. "The property is ready for transfer. All the paperwork's in order, you know. I just need your signature in a few places, and then I'll drive you out there. It's about an hour and a half on decent roads, then another 30 minutes on Forest Service roads that are less decent." "What's it like, the cabin?" Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. Finch considered the question carefully. "It's remote, very remote. No power lines running out there, though Nathan installed solar panels about 10 years back. Hand pump for water from a well. Wood stove for heat and cooking. It's rustic, and it's not going to be easy, but it's solid. Nathan built it himself back in the 50s, and he maintained it right up until he died. It's more than a shack, if that's what you're worried about." Sarah signed the papers where Finch indicated, her hand shaking slightly, making her signature look jagged and uncertain. Lily watched with wide eyes, understanding in her child's way that something important was happening, that their lives were changing in this moment. When it was done, when the deed had been transferred and notarized and filed, Finch pulled out a brass key from his desk drawer, old and worn smooth by decades of use, and handed it to Sarah. "Welcome home, Ms. Mitchell." They left the Ford in Helena at Finch's suggestion. The Forest Service roads weren't kind to low-clearance vehicles, and piled into his pickup truck, a battered Chevy that had clearly seen better decades but still ran strong. Lily sat between them, bouncing with barely contained excitement, asking questions faster than Finch could answer them. Did Nathan have any pets? No, he lived alone. Were there really bears? Yes, black bears mostly, but they generally stayed away from people. Could she learn to ride a horse? Well, they didn't have a horse, but maybe someday. The drive out of Helena took them through increasingly wild country, paved roads giving way to gravel, gravel giving way to dirt tracks barely wider than the truck. The forest closed in on both sides, pine and fir and aspen, the late afternoon sun slanting through the branches in golden bars. Finch drove with the easy confidence of someone who'd made this trip many times, and he told them stories about Nathan, filling in the outline of a man Sarah had never really known. He was a Vietnam vet, like your father. Came back in '68 and couldn't settle back into regular life. Worked as an accountant for a few years in Seattle, saved every penny, then bought this land and disappeared into the woods. Built a cabin over 2 summers, living in a tent while he worked. Never married, never had kids, just him and the forest for 37 years. Why did he leave it to us? Lily's question was the same one that had been circling Sarah's mind since the letter arrived. Finch glanced down at her, then at Sarah. He said you reminded him of a different time, when people kept their word. He watched your family from a distance, weddings, funerals, reunions, and he said you were the only one who gave without keeping score, that your siblings took, but you gave. He respected that. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back. Nathan had seen her, had noticed, even from a distance, even when she'd felt invisible to everyone who should have cared. He'd left her something precious, not because she'd asked for it, but because he'd decided she deserved it. The weight of that gift, the responsibility, and the hope in the sheer improbability of it made her chest ache. The truck rounded a final curve and the forest opened into a clearing. And there it was, the cabin. 2 stories of hand-hewn logs darkened by weather in time to a deep honey color, a steep metal roof gone green with age but clearly still sound, a stone chimney rising from the center like a promise of warmth. A wide porch wrapped around the front, the railings carved with intricate patterns, and behind the cabin, mountains rose purple and magnificent against the evening sky. It was beautiful. It was impossible. It was theirs. Lily gasped, a small sound of pure wonder, and scrambled out of the truck before it had fully stopped. Sarah followed more slowly, her legs unsteady, unable to quite believe what she was seeing. This wasn't a shack. This wasn't some falling down disaster. This was a home, a real home, built with care and maintained with love by a man who'd decided, for reasons she'd probably never fully understand, that Sarah and her daughter deserved it. Finch handed Sarah the key, brass and heavy in her palm. I'll leave you to it. There's a care package inside, food and firewood to get you started. I'll come back in a few days to check on you, bring any supplies you need. But for now, it's all yours. Sarah turned the key over in her fingers, then looked down at Lily, who was practically vibrating with excitement. Want to do the honors? Lily took the key with both hands, approached the front door like it was something sacred, and carefully fitted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, well-oiled despite decades of use, and the door swung open with a soft creak. Warm air rolled out, carrying the scent of wood smoke and pine, and something else, something that felt like peace. Lily stepped over the threshold first, Sarah right behind her, and together they entered Nathan Mitchell's cabin. Their cabin now, and Sarah heard her daughter whisper, her voice full of awe and gratitude and hope. We have a home. The first morning in the cabin, Lily woke to silence so complete it felt like the world had been remade overnight. No traffic sounds, no voices from other cars in the parking lot, no mechanical hum of refrigerated trucks making deliveries. Just birds, dozens of them, calling to each other through the forest in a language she didn't understand but wanted to learn. She lay in the smaller upstairs bedroom. Nathan's quilts heavy and warm around her, and watched sunlight move across the pine plank ceiling in patterns that shifted with the breeze outside. Her stuffed rabbit sat on the windowsill, looking out at mountains that seemed close enough to touch. And for the first time in her 9 years, Lily understood what the word home actually meant. Sarah stood at the kitchen window watching her daughter explore the clearing outside, running from tree to tree with energy that had been compressed too long in the Ford's back seat. The hand pump at the sink had taken some getting used to, her nursing school muscles remembering the rhythm after a few tries. And the water that came up was so cold and clear, it tasted like it had never touched anything human before. The wood stove radiated steady heat, Nathan's carefully split kindling catching easily from the fire she'd built using techniques half remembered from a camping trip 20 years ago. Coffee percolated in an ancient enamel pot, and Sarah allowed herself to feel something dangerously close to contentment. The cabin revealed itself slowly over those first days, each room a careful study in self-sufficiency. Nathan's workshop in the back held tools organized with military precision, each one clean and oiled and hung on pegboard with its outline traced in marker so you knew exactly where it belonged. The root cellar stayed cool even in afternoon heat, shelves lined with mason jars full of preserves that were probably still good, vegetables Nathan had grown and put up himself. Upstairs, his bedroom held almost nothing personal. A narrow bed, a dresser, a single photograph of a much younger man in army fatigues standing next to a helicopter with Vietnam's jungle behind him. Sarah studied that photograph and tried to reconcile the serious-faced soldier with the man who'd built this sanctuary and left it to a niece he'd barely known. Lily made discoveries daily, her child's curiosity uncovering things Sarah's practical mind might have missed. A carved wooden box under the eaves held Nathan's war medals, Bronze Star and Purple Heart, wrapped in cloth that had kept them from tarnishing. A bookshelf in the main room concealed a fold-down desk behind a false front, the surface scarred with decades of use and covered in Nathan's careful handwriting. Lists, calculations, observations about weather and wildlife, and the slow passage of seasons. She found bird nests tucked into the porch rafters, a family of mice living in the woodshed who scattered when she opened the door, and a trail through the forest that led to a creek so clear you could count individual stones on the bottom. It was Lily who first noticed something odd about the main room's dimensions. She'd been measuring things with a tape measure from Nathan's workshop, making a map of the cabin in her notebook with careful attention to scale when she frowned and redid her calculations. The exterior wall measured 42 feet, but the interior rooms only added up to 38. 4 feet unaccounted for, which seemed like too much for just insulation and log thickness. Sarah was replacing a broken pane in one of the upstairs windows when Lily came up with her notebook open, brow furrowed in concentration. "Mom, I think there's a secret room." The tape measure proved Lily right. Sarah walked the perimeter of the main floor, counting her steps, then did the interior, and came up 4 feet short each time. They studied the walls together, looking for seams or breaks in the logs, but everything appeared solid and continuous. The stone fireplace dominated the north wall, massive and beautifully constructed from river rock fitted together with barely visible mortar. Sarah ran her hands over the stones, looking for anything that might move, while Lily examined the carved mantel with its patterns of leaves and vines and birds. It was the birds that caught Lily's attention. They were everywhere in the carving, dozens of different species rendered in such details you could almost identify them. Hawks and owls, songbirds and woodpeckers. But one, a small wren near the bottom right corner, seemed different. The carving was slightly deeper, the wood around it showing wear, as if someone had touched it repeatedly over years. Lily pressed it experimentally and felt it give slightly inward with a soft click. The sound that followed was subtle but unmistakable. Stone grinding against stone, somewhere behind the fireplace. Sarah stepped back quickly, pulling Lily with her, as a section of floor in front of the hearth separated from the rest, with a hairline crack that became visible as dust, that had settled into the seams suddenly broke free. The panel was 4 feet square, perfectly fitted, and it lifted on some kind of counterweight mechanism when Sarah worked her fingers into the crack and pulled. Stone steps descended into darkness, narrow and steep, carved directly into the bedrock foundation. Sarah found a flashlight in Nathan's workshop, tested it to make sure the battery still held charge, and stood at the top of those steps trying to decide if she was brave enough to go down. Lily pressed against her side, not scared but vibrating with excitement, and Sarah felt her daughter's absolute faith that whatever waited below would be good, would be more of Nathan's gifts, would be another piece of the puzzle falling into place. The stairs ended 12 feet down in a chamber that took Sarah's breath away. The ceiling was vaulted and supported by hand-hewn beams that must have taken months to shape and place. The walls were smooth stone and shelves lined them floor to ceiling, organized with the same meticulous care as the workshop upstairs. Wooden crates stacked carefully, each labeled with numbers and dates in Nathan's precise script. Leather-bound books arranged by size, glass-fronted cabinets holding objects Sarah couldn't immediately identify in the flashlight's beam. And in the center, a massive oak desk with papers arranged in neat stacks and a journal lying open as if Nathan had just stepped away. Lily moved to the desk while Sarah stood frozen, her nurse's brain trying to process what she was seeing and coming up blank. The journal's open page showed columns of items and numbers, dates ranging from the early 1960s through the 1990s, each entry meticulously documented. Lily picked it up carefully, both hands supporting the leather binding, and brought it to her mother. The title page read, Private Collection and Estate Records, Property of Nathan James Mitchell, begun January 7, 1963, updated through September 2, 1994. Below that, in slightly different ink, as if added later, for Sarah and Lily, should you find this, everything here is yours now. I trust you will know what to do. Sarah's hands shook as she turned pages, the flashlight balanced on the desk, casting shadows that made the numbers seem to dance. Entry after entry, each one listing an item purchased, the price paid, authentication details, and current estimated value. A landscape painting by Albert Bierstadt, bought at an estate sale in Portland for $375 in 1963, now worth $52,000. A first edition Shakespeare folio purchased for $800 in 1964, currently valued at $120,000. The numbers grew as she flipped forward, paintings by artists Sarah vaguely recognized from art history classes she'd taken in nursing school. Andrew Wyeth, Mary Cassatt, Winslow Homer. Stock certificates from the 1970s, companies that had seemed like risky bets at the time, but had become household names. Apple, Microsoft, IBM. Lily pulled open the nearest crate using a pry bar she found leaning against the desk, old enough to know to be careful but too curious to wait. Yellowed newspaper from 1968 wrapped around a painting, oil on canvas, mountains and clouds rendered in dramatic strokes that made the scene feel alive. The signature in the corner matched the journal entry, A. Bierstadt. Sarah lifted it carefully, the framed solid wood gone dark with age, and leaned it against the desk where they could see it better. The painting alone, according to Nathan's notes, was worth enough to buy a house. A nice house. Maybe several. They spent hours in that underground room, opening crates and cabinets with increasing amazement, each discovery more impossible than the last. A bronze sculpture of a running horse, patina green and beautiful. Ancient coins in velvet-lined cases, Roman and Byzantine and Chinese, each labeled with acquisition, date, and provenance. First edition books by Twain and Hemingway and Fitzgerald, their dust jackets protected in archival sleeves. A framed map from 1702 showing territories that didn't exist anymore, hand-colored and gorgeous. Financial ledgers revealed stock purchases that had multiplied 100-fold, bonds that had matured and been reinvested, a patient and disciplined approach to building wealth that had compounded over decades. The final page of the main journal stopped Sarah's breath completely. Nathan's neat handwriting, dated September 2, 1994, 6 months before his death, according to Finch. Final accounting as of this date. Total estimated value of collection based on current market conditions and professional appraisals completed August 1994. Paintings and sculptures, $73,200,000. Rare books and manuscripts, $18,500,000. Coins and precious metals, $42,800,000. Stocks and bonds, $112,300,000. Miscellaneous items, $18,200,000. Total estimated value, $265 million. Sarah read the number 3 times, her vision blurring, before she could make herself believe it. $265 million. Hidden in a vault under a cabin in Montana, left by a man who'd lived alone for 37 years and apparently never told anyone what he'd been building down here. She looked at Lily, who was carefully examining a collection of jeweled brooches in a glass case, and tried to understand what this meant, what it changed, what Nathan had given them that went so far beyond a roof over their heads, it defied comprehension. A separate letter tucked into the journal's back cover, addressed in Nathan's hand. For Sarah Mitchell, should she find this collection. Sarah's fingers trembled as she unfolded the paper. Decades old but preserved perfectly in the underground chamber's constant temperature. The words swam for a moment before focusing. Dear Sarah, I watched you grow up from a distance. Saw you at family reunions, weddings, funerals, all the obligatory gatherings that families convince themselves matter. I saw you care for your father in his final illness. Saw how you raised Lily alone with dignity when her father proved himself unworthy. I saw how your siblings took and took, how you gave and gave, how they made you believe that was what family meant. This collection represents my life's work, 37 years of patience and faith that beauty and value are worth preserving. I leave it to you because you understand what truly matters. Not wealth, but character. Not taking, but giving. Your siblings will come when they find out. They'll claim you're not capable of managing this, that you need their help, that family means sharing. Stand firm, this is yours, earned not by blood, but by being the kind of person who deserves it. Use it to give Lily the life she's earned by being brave enough to have you as her mother. With respect and hope for your future, Nathan James Mitchell. Sarah had to sit down on the stone floor, the letter clutched in both hands, and let herself cry for the first time since they'd arrived. These weren't the silent tears she'd learned to shed in the Ford while Lily slept, the grief and frustration and fear she'd carried for 2 years. These were different, complicated relief and gratitude, and a kind of grief for a man she'd never really known, but who'd seen her more clearly than anyone in her life, except maybe her father. Nathan had watched her fail and struggle and lose everything, and instead of judging her, he'd decided she deserved better. He'd built this gift over decades and saved it for someone he believed would use it right, and somehow, impossibly, he'd chosen her. Lily found a second letter in a small wooden box behind the desk, this one addressed in the same handwriting. To Lily, the brave girl who finds my secret. She brought it to Sarah, who read it aloud, her voice still thick with tears. Dear Lily, if you're reading this, you've found my hidden room. You must be clever and curious, which are fine qualities. This room holds many valuable things, but the most valuable thing is the family who found it together. I never had children of my own, but I watched your mother raise you, and I saw how much she gave to make sure you were fed and safe and loved. I hope you know how lucky you are to have her, and I hope she knows how lucky she is to have you. Whatever happens with this collection, remember, your mother is a good person in a world that often punishes good people. Protect her. She spent her whole life protecting you. Be brave, little one. The world needs more brave children. Your friend across time, Nathan. Lily pressed close to Sarah's side, small and warm and steady. He knew about me, even though I wasn't born yet. He knew there would be someone like you, someone worth everything I've been through. They climbed back upstairs as the evening fell, closing the hidden entrance carefully behind them, and sat together on the porch watching the sun paint the mountains purple and gold. Sarah's mind raced through implications and complications, through the certainty that this would change everything, that their siblings would find out somehow, that the peace of these first days was about to shatter. But for now, for this moment, she let herself simply sit with her daughter in front of their home, while mountains stood eternal and patient in the distance, and tried to accept that sometimes, rarely, impossibly, the universe gave you exactly what you needed when you needed it most. The fragile peace lasted exactly 1 week. Sarah had been careful, had told no one except Harold Finch that they'd found anything unusual. But small towns apparently worked on their own information network that had nothing to do with telephones or internet. Betty Sullivan, the librarian at Cedar Falls' tiny public library, 5 miles down the mountain, had mentioned to someone that Nathan's niece and her daughter were settling into the old cabin. That someone had mentioned it to someone else, who'd connected Nathan Mitchell's name with an article from a Helena newspaper's archive about a reclusive collector who donated a valuable painting to a museum anonymously back in the 1980s. By the time the regional news picked up the story, Montana recluse leaves fortune to homeless single mother, Sarah's phone was ringing with calls from numbers she didn't recognize. She ignored them all except the one from her sister Rebecca, partly from morbid curiosity and partly from the naive hope that maybe, just maybe, family would mean something this time. Rebecca's voice came through bright and concerned, the real estate agent pitch she used on clients who needed to be convinced they wanted something. Sarah, I've been trying to reach you for days. I saw the news story about Nathan's collection. Honey, that's amazing, but you must be overwhelmed. Kyle and I have been talking, and we think it would be best if we came up to help you sort through everything. You know, get proper appraisals, figure out taxes, make sure you're protected. Sarah's hand tightened on the phone. I'm handling it, Rebecca. I have an attorney. A small-town Montana lawyer? Sarah, be realistic. This is potentially worth millions. You need a team, proper representation. We're family. We should stick together on this. The word family in Rebecca's mouth felt like a weapon being loaded. Like we stuck together when I was living in my car. A pause, then Rebecca's voice shifted, the warmth draining out like someone had flipped a switch. That's not fair. We all had our own problems. But this is different. This is important. And I wasn't important? Don't be dramatic. Look, Kyle's already talked to a lawyer friend who specializes in estate management. We just want to make sure you don't screw this up. Given your history with financial decisions, Sarah hung up. Her hands shook with anger rather than fear this time, a different kind of trembling that felt almost cleansing. She'd spent 2 years believing she'd somehow failed, that her homelessness was evidence of poor judgment rather than bad luck and family betrayal. Nathan's letter had shifted something fundamental in how she saw herself, and Rebecca's casual assumption that Sarah couldn't handle her own affairs bounced off that new understanding like rain off stone. Lily looked up from her homework, spread across the kitchen table where real sunlight came through real windows in a real house that belonged to them. Was that Aunt Rebecca? Yeah, baby. What did she want? What she always wants, to take control of something that isn't hers. Are you going to let her? Sarah met her daughter's serious dark eyes and felt something settle into place, solid and unmovable. Not a chance. Harold Finch arrived the next morning with 2 people Sarah hadn't met, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and sharper business suit, and a man in his 40s who carried himself with the calm confidence of someone used to courtrooms. Patricia Ortega specialized in estate law for high net worth individuals, and Robert Kane defended against frivolous guardianship claims. Finch had called them and after the news story broke, after he'd received 3 separate calls from Sarah's siblings, all claiming concern about her ability to manage Nathan's bequest. They sat around Nathan's handmade table while Sarah told them everything, from the stolen insurance money, to living in the Ford, to finding the vault to Rebecca's phone call yesterday. Patricia took notes in a leather portfolio, her pen moving steadily across the paper. First thing we do is establish a trust. Everything goes into it, with you as sole trustee. Even if they somehow convinced a court you were incompetent, which they won't, the trust protects the assets. They can't touch it, but they can make our lives hell trying. Robert leaned back in his chair, studying Sarah with an expression she couldn't quite read. Frivolous lawsuits, depositions, court hearings, they can leak information to the press, turn this into a media circus. They can drag you through the mud publicly while we fight them in court. How long would that take? Depends on how determined they are. 6 months to a year, maybe more. Sarah looked at Lily, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner with her notebook, drawing houses like she always did when she needed to feel safe. A year of fighting, of having her fitness as a mother questioned publicly, of Lily hearing strangers debate whether Sarah was capable of caring for her. The thought made her feel sick. What's the alternative? There isn't one. Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. Not if you want to keep what's yours. Nathan left this to you specifically. Your siblings have no legal claim, but that won't stop them from trying. The question isn't whether you fight, it's how well prepared you are when they show up. They spent 3 days building Sarah's defense before her siblings even filed papers. Medical evaluation by a psychologist in Helena who pronounced Sarah sharp, competent, and showing no signs of impaired judgment. In fact, the doctor noted in her report, Sarah had demonstrated remarkable resilience and clear thinking despite circumstances that would have broken many people. Financial records documenting the systematic drainage of her father's insurance money, each loan carefully noted with dates and amounts and promises made and broken. Character references from Sister Maria at the shelter, from Lily's teacher who could attest that despite homelessness, Lily had never missed school, from the director of the YMCA where Sarah had volunteered in exchange for shower privileges. Betty Sullivan came to the cabin uninvited but welcome, a folder under her arm that she'd been keeping for years without quite knowing why. Inside were newspaper clippings spanning decades, articles about art sales and market trends in technology stocks, all of them with notes in the margins in Betty's neat handwriting connecting them to Nathan. I tracked his investments, she explained, almost apologetically. Small town, not much else to do, and I was curious. He'd mention things sometimes when he came in for books, little comments about art or markets, and I'd research them. He was always right, always ahead of everyone else. Sarah studied the clippings, the pattern they revealed of a man with remarkable foresight and patience. Why would he talk to you about it? I don't think he meant to. I think he was just lonely. And sometimes you need to tell someone what you know, even if they don't fully understand it. Betty's voice softened. He talked about you once, after your father's funeral. Said you were the kind of person who gave without keeping score, and that was rare. Said he hoped life would be kinder to you than it had been. He decided to be that kindness himself. Yes, he did. Kyle and Emma arrived on a Wednesday afternoon, their rental SUV expensive and out of place on the Forest Service Road. Rebecca came separately in her BMW, followed by a man in a suit who introduced himself as Gerald Thorne, attorney at law, and a woman with a professional camera who started taking photographs the moment they climbed out of their vehicles. Sarah watched them approach from the porch, Lily pressed against her side, and felt something fierce and protective rise up in her chest. They'd come to take what Nathan had given her, to convince a court she wasn't capable, to tear down in an afternoon what she'd been building for weeks. Rebecca smiled as she climbed the porch steps, and it was the smile Sarah had seen her use on difficult sellers, all warmth on the surface and calculation underneath. Sarah, the cabin's lovely, very rustic. I can see why you'd want to hold on to it. It's my home, Rebecca. Nathan left it to me and Lily. Of course he did, but honey, be realistic. There's no way you can manage a collection worth this much. You don't have the expertise, the connections, the financial literacy. Someone needs to step in before this becomes a disaster. Kyle pushed past Rebecca, his face already red with the anger that came so easily to him. We're family, Sarah. That collection should be split 5 ways. It's not fair that Nathan left everything to you just because you were convenient. Lily's voice cut through before Sarah could respond, high and clear and shaking with fury. My mom isn't convenient. She's good. And you took Grandpa's money and left us in a parking lot. Gerald Thorne stepped forward smoothly, his briefcase clicking open. Ms. Mitchell, I represent your siblings in this matter. We're filing a petition for guardianship based on concerns about your capacity to manage a substantial estate. Your history of housing instability, financial difficulties, and current situation as a homeless single mother raising a minor child will raise serious questions about judgment. I'm not homeless. I have a home. Nathan gave me one. A cabin with no running water, no electricity from the grid, miles from the nearest town. That's not a suitable environment for a child. Thorne handed her a thick stack of papers. These are copies of our petition. You'll be served officially within 48 hours. I'd advise you to get legal representation, though I doubt you can afford anyone who could effectively oppose us. Sarah took the papers with steady hands, refusing to let them see how her heart was hammering. Emma stepped forward, her voice softer than the others, but no less cutting. Sarah, we're doing this for Lily. You've been through so much, and we're worried about your mental state. Living in a car with a child, that's traumatic. You need help. I needed help 2 years ago. You all made it very clear help wasn't coming. Those were loans that were never repaid, that you never intended to repay. You took everything I had, and then you took my father's insurance money, and then you disappeared. Sarah's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. And now you show up because suddenly there's more to take, and you want me to believe it's because you care about Lily, about me. Rebecca's mask finally cracked, irritation flashing across her features. This isn't about the past. This is about protecting assets that should belong to all of us. Nathan was Dad's uncle, which makes him family to all of us. He didn't leave it to all of you, he left it to me, specifically, because he knew exactly what kind of people you are. The photographer had been taking pictures throughout the exchange, her camera clicking constantly. Sarah realized too late this was all theater, all designed to paint her as unstable and her siblings as concerned family members trying to help. Kyle noticed her looking at the camera and smirked. Hope you're ready for this to get ugly, Sarah, because it's going to. We'll prove you're unfit to manage this estate, unfit to raise Lily in these conditions, unfit period. And then everything Nathan left you will be liquidated and properly distributed among family. Get off my property. This isn't over. Rebecca turned on her heel, gesturing for the others to follow. We'll see you in court, Sarah. And when the judge sees what kind of mother lets her daughter live in a car, when they see your history of poor decisions and instability, we'll be appointed guardians and you'll be lucky if you get supervised visitation. They left in a spray of gravel, their expensive vehicles churning up dust that hung in the air long after they disappeared down the Forest Service road. Sarah stood on the porch with Lily pressed against her side and let herself shake. Let the fear show now that her siblings couldn't see it. She'd known they'd come. Nathan had warned her. But knowing and experiencing were different things, and the reality of their cruelty, their willingness to weaponize her homelessness and use Lily as leverage, hit harder than she'd expected. Sheriff Tom Whitaker arrived an hour later, having been called by Finch, who'd heard from Betty Sullivan, who'd heard from someone else that Sarah's family had shown up. He walked the property with Sarah, documenting everything sharing, and when they found the GPS tracker stuck to the underside of the Ford's bumper, his expression went hard. That's illegal surveillance. Stalking. I'll document this and it goes in my report. He bagged the tracker carefully. Your siblings just handed us evidence of harassment. Will it matter? In court, will any of this matter? Ms. Mitchell, I've been sheriff in this county for 20 years. I knew Nathan, knew what kind of man he was. If he left you this property, it was because he saw something in you worth protecting. And this community tends to protect what Nathan valued. He handed her a card with his personal cell number written on the back. Anything happens, anything at all, you call me directly. Day or night. The next weeks blurred together in a haze of legal preparation and mounting dread. Patricia worked with ruthless efficiency, building Sarah's case piece by piece. Robert deposed witnesses, gathered evidence, crafted arguments that would dismantle every claim her siblings made. But the strain showed in Sarah's face, in the way she couldn't sleep more than a few hours at a time, in how she'd check on Lily 3 times a night to make sure she was still there, still safe, still theirs. Cedar Falls closed ranks around them in ways that surprised Sarah daily. The owner of the general store delivered supplies and refused payment. The mechanic serviced the Ford for free. Betty organized a rotating schedule of people who'd drive by the cabin once a day, not intrusively, but just to make sure everything was okay. The local doctor examined Lily and wrote a detailed report about her excellent health, her advanced reading level, her emotional stability despite recent hardships. People Sarah had never met showed up at the courthouse filing to support her. Their presence a quiet statement about what mattered in small towns where everyone knew your business, but that also meant they had your back when outsiders tried to tear you down. Daniel called 2 weeks before the court date, his voice tentative and ashamed. Sarah, I'm out. I told them I won't be part of this. I withdrew my name from the petition. Why now? Why not before they broke into my home? Because someone had. The evidence was clear, even if nothing had been taken. Just searched through, violated. Because I finally realized what we did to you. What I did. I took your money and convinced myself I deserved it because I'm your brother. But I didn't deserve it. None of us did. We stole from you and then blamed you when there was nothing left to steal. His voice cracked. Nathan saw that. He knew what we were. That's why he left everything to you and not us. What do you want me to say? Nothing. I don't want anything. I just wanted you to know that at least one of your siblings finally woke up. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know. He paused. And Sarah, the others aren't going to stop. Rebecca's borrowed money to pay for the lawyers. Kyle's convinced this is their big payday. They're desperate now. Please be careful. Sarah hung up and told Lily what Daniel had said, and her daughter looked thoughtful in that way she had that made her seem older than 9. Do you think he means it? I don't know, baby. People say a lot of things. But he's not fighting us anymore. That's something. Yeah, that's something. The night before the court hearing, Patricia arrived with something she'd found during discovery, a small fireproof safe hidden in Nathan's workshop that required a combination Lily had figured out from dates on his war medals. Inside was a VHS tape, a letter, and a key to a safety deposit box in Helena. The letter was brief, Nathan's handwriting shakier than in earlier documents, dated just weeks before his death. If you're watching this, you've found everything and the wolves have arrived. I recorded this knowing exactly what would happen. Watch it, show it in court if necessary. They found an old VCR player in the attic, hooked it to a small television Nathan had apparently kept for weather reports, and pressed play. The image that filled the screen was Nathan himself, maybe 69 years old, sitting at the desk in the vault, surrounded by his collection. His voice was steady and clear. My name is Nathan James Mitchell. Today is September 3rd. I am of sound mind and body, as will be attested by my doctor and attorney. I'm recording this because I know what's coming. I've observed Sarah's siblings for years, watched them at family gatherings, seen their character, or lack of it. They will take every dollar Sarah and Lily have. They will abandon them when the money runs out. And when they learn about this inheritance, they will return. They will claim concern, incompetence, manipulation. They will lie. They will manipulate. They will do anything to get what they think they're owed. But they're owed nothing. This collection is mine to give. I give it to Sarah Mitchell and her daughter Lily. No one else. Nathan looked directly at the camera, his eyes sharp and certain despite his age. To any court reviewing this, I was a veteran, an accountant, a collector. I built this over 37 years with full mental capacity. These are my wishes. To Sarah and Lily, stand firm. You deserve this. Don't let them take what I mean for you. I'm proud to have family like you. Blood doesn't make family. Character does. The tape ended, static filling the screen. Sarah sat frozen, tears streaming down her face, while Lily pressed against her side. Nathan had known. 20 years before it happened, he'd known everything, had predicted their exact moves, had left evidence that would destroy their case in court. He'd protected her from beyond the grave with the same meticulous care he'd used to build his collection. And Sarah felt the weight of that protection, like an anchor keeping her steady against the storm her siblings had brought. Patricia rewound the tape carefully. This is devastating evidence. In court, this will destroy their credibility completely. But Sarah, we have to be strategic. We don't reveal this until the right moment, until they've committed to their story and can't back out. Then we show the judge what Nathan predicted. When? When they think they're winning, when Rebecca is confident. Then we show them who Nathan really was and what he really thought of them. The storm that had been threatening all day finally broke after midnight, rain hammering the metal roof and wind howling through the canyon. Sarah lay awake listening to it, Lily asleep in the next room, and tried to prepare herself for what tomorrow would bring. The courtroom, the judge, her siblings' lawyer tearing apart her life for public consumption, the very real possibility that despite everything, despite Nathan's gift and Patricia's preparation and the community's support, she might lose. Not the money, but Lily. That was the threat that cut deepest, Rebecca's vicious suggestion that Sarah was an unfit mother, that living in a car constituted child neglect, that a judge might decide Lily deserved better. But Sarah had been afraid before, had survived worse than a courtroom battle, had kept herself and her daughter alive and together through 2 years of homelessness. She'd learned to fix things with her hands, to make food stretch, to maintain hope when everything logical said hope was foolish. She'd learned that character wasn't about never falling down. It was about getting back up when you did. And Nathan, who'd watched her from a distance for years, had seen that, had believed she was strong enough to protect what he'd given her, had trusted her with not just wealth, but with proving that sometimes, rarely, impossibly, good people won. Thunder rolled across the mountains and lightning lit up the bedroom in stark white flashes. Sarah got up, checked on Lily one more time, found her daughter sleeping peacefully with her stuffed rabbit and her notebook full of drawings of houses with three figures holding hands. She stood in the doorway and made a promise to Nathan Mitchell, to herself, to her daughter who deserved better than what the world had tried to give her. Tomorrow they'd walk into that courthouse and face her siblings' cruelty with evidence and truth and the strength that came from being people Nathan had believed were worth saving. And they would win. Not because justice was guaranteed, but because giving up had never been an option. The Jefferson County Courthouse had stood since 1923, its stone columns weathered by decades of Montana winters, its halls echoing with the accumulated weight of every dispute that had passed through these rooms. Sarah walked up the steps at 8:30 on a Thursday morning, Lily's hand tight in hers, Patricia Ortega and Robert Kane flanking them like shields. The sky threatened snow despite it being only October, clouds hanging low and gray over the mountains that ringed Helena on all sides. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed, and the air smelled of old wood and floor wax and the particular tension that came from families tearing each other apart in public. Rebecca stood near the water fountain, navy suit perfectly tailored, hair styled like she was about to close $1 million sale rather than try to steal one from her sister. Kyle paced by the windows, his tie slightly crooked, face already flushed with the anger that seemed to be his permanent state these days. Emma sat on a bench, hands folded, eyes downcast, playing the role of concerned family member with practiced precision. Daniel's absence felt deliberate, a statement he'd made with his feet rather than his words. Gerald Thorne conferred with two associates, all of them carrying briefcases thick with documents designed to paint Sarah as incompetent and desperate and dangerous to her own child. When Rebecca spotted them, her expression shifted from worry to something harder, calculating, the mask she wore slipping just enough that Sarah could see the resentment underneath. They didn't approach each other, didn't speak, just stood on opposite ends of the hallway like armies waiting for the battle to begin. Sarah felt Lily press closer and squeezed her daughter's hand, trying to transmit strength she didn't entirely feel. Everything they had, everything Nathan had given them, came down to the next few hours and whether a judge would see through her siblings' performance to the truth underneath. Cedar Falls residents arrived in a steady stream, filling the benches with quiet solidarity. Betty Sullivan with her folder of clippings, Sheriff Whitaker in full uniform, his presence a statement about who the law was actually here to protect. The general store owner, the mechanic, the doctor who'd examined Lily and pronounced her thriving. Sister Maria made the 3-hour drive from Tacoma, her presence a reminder of where Sarah had started and how far she'd come. They formed a wall of witnesses to character, to resilience, to the difference between people who talked about family and people who actually showed up when it mattered. Judge Carolyn Winters entered at 9 sharp, black robe crisp, silver hair pulled back, expression stern, but not unkind. She was early 60s, with the bearing of someone who'd presided over enough custody battles and estate disputes to have developed immunity to manipulation. The bailiff called the court to order, and everyone stood, then sat, then waited while the judge arranged papers and surveyed the room with eyes that missed nothing. Case number 74-92, petition for guardianship of Sarah Mitchell and custody of minor child Lily Mitchell. Mr. Thorne, you filed the petition. Present your case. Gerald Thorne stood, smoothing his expensive suit, and began his performance. His voice carried practiced concern as he outlined his client's worries. Sarah's history of homelessness, her lack of financial management experience, the remote cabin unsuitable for a child. He presented bank records showing evictions, employment gaps, the systematic pattern of what he called poor judgment. He painted a picture of a desperate woman who'd stumbled into wealth beyond her capacity to manage, who needed family intervention before disaster struck. Kyle testified with false concern that might have been convincing if Sarah hadn't known him her entire life. He described years of watching his sister struggle, of trying to help only to be rebuffed, of growing alarm at her choices. The rewriting of history was breathtaking in its audacity. He'd become the long-suffering brother exhausted by Sarah's poor judgment, erasing completely the theft, the abandonment, the GPS tracker found on her car. Rebecca followed, her real estate training evident in every calculated word. She spoke of relief when she heard about the inheritance, then worry when she learned about the isolated cabin, then deep concern about Sarah managing hundreds of millions without expertise or support. Her performance was polished, believable, the concerned older sister who just wanted to protect her family. Emma's testimony hit softer notes, more manipulative in its gentleness. She spoke about trauma-damaging judgment, about loving her niece enough to intervene, about wanting both Sarah and Lily to be safe. Her voice caught at strategic moments, tears appearing on cue, the worried aunt painted in pastels rather than Rebecca's sharp lines. Judge Winters took notes throughout, her expression unreadable. When Thorne rested his case, she looked at Robert Kane with eyes that had seen this play before and weren't impressed. Defense rush? Robert stood, and his opening moved like a scalpel. Your Honor, this isn't about protecting vulnerable people. This is about adult children who stole from their mother, abandoned her when she needed help, and now want access to money they have no legal right to. He presented evidence methodically, building a case that dismantled every claim piece by piece. Bank records showing the systematic theft of $87,000. Text messages and emails where Sarah had asked for repayment and been ignored or blocked. Sheriff Whitaker's report documenting the GPS tracker, proving harassment and stalking. Medical evaluations from 2 independent psychologists confirming Sarah's complete mental competency. Character witnesses from Cedar Falls testifying to her capability and Lily's well-being. Sister Maria's testimony particularly cut through the courtroom's tension. Her voice was steady and certain as she described Sarah at 19, fleeing domestic violence with an infant, working 2 jobs while attending nursing school, giving back to help other women even after she'd moved into her own place. When she came back to us 2 years ago, she didn't ask for handouts. She asked for an address so she could apply for jobs. She maintained her daughter's school attendance, her health, her hope. I've seen hundreds of mothers come through our doors, and Sarah Mitchell is one of the strongest, most capable women I've ever known. Using her past vulnerability as evidence of incompetence is not just wrong, it's obscene. Betty Sullivan brought her folder of clippings, explaining Nathan's remarkable foresight, his decades of careful observation, his deliberate choice of Sarah as his heir. Nathan told me once that Sarah was the kind of person who gave without keeping score, and that such people deserved to be protected from those who only knew how to take. He knew what her siblings were. That's why he chose her. When Robert rested his case, Judge Winters leaned forward slightly. I'd like to hear from Ms. Mitchell herself and from Lily, if she's willing to speak. Sarah approached the witness stand with legs that wanted to buckle but didn't, took the oath with a voice that stayed steady through force of will, and met the judge's eyes directly. The questions came gently but probed deep. Why had she been homeless? What had happened with the insurance money? How was she managing the inheritance? What were her plans for Lily's future? Sarah answered each one honestly, not hiding the hard parts, not pretending she hadn't struggled. Yes, she'd lived in her car. Yes, she'd been evicted when she couldn't make rent after her siblings took the money they'd promised to repay. Yes, the past 2 years had been brutal. But she'd kept Lily safe, enrolled in school, fed and clothed and loved. She'd never stopped looking for work, never stopped trying, never given up even when everything logical said giving up was the only reasonable response. Your siblings claim you lack the capacity to manage Nathan's estate. What do you say to that? I say they're wrong. I've been learning about the collection, working with attorneys and financial advisors who specialize in exactly this kind of estate. I'm not trying to manage it alone. I'm building a team of experts who can guide me. But I'm the trustee because that's what Nathan wanted, and I'm going to honor his wishes. And their concerns about Lily's living conditions? The cabin has everything we need. Solar power, well water, heat from the wood stove. Lily has her own room for the first time in her life. She's healthier than she's been in years. We're not isolated. Cedar Falls is 5 miles away. Helena's an hour. Medical care is accessible. We're not living in poverty anymore. We're living in peace. Judge Winters nodded, then turned her attention to Lily. Miss Mitchell, I know you're only 9 years old and this must be scary, but I'd like to hear from you if you're comfortable speaking. Lily stood, walked to the witness stand with her chin up and her shoulders back, and Sarah felt pride so fierce it bordered on pain. Her daughter, brave and small and absolutely unshakable, facing down adults who wanted to tear their family apart and refusing to be intimidated. Lily, do you understand why we're here today? Yes, ma'am. My aunts and uncles want to take our house and say my mom can't take care of me. Tell me about living with your mother. What's that like? Lily's voice stayed clear, though Sarah could hear the tremor underneath. My mom is the strongest person I know. When we lived in the car, she always made sure I ate first, even when that meant she didn't eat. She walked me to school every day and helped me with homework at the library. She never made me feel like being poor was my fault or like we were less than other people. She kept me safe. And now, at the cabin? Now we have a home. I have my own room with a window that looks at the mountains. I go to school in Cedar Falls and I'm doing really good in all my subjects. We have friends who visit us. Mom taught me how to chop wood and pump water and do things with my own hands. I'm learning stuff I never could have learned in the city. Do you feel safe with your mother? Yes, ma'am, always. Even when we didn't have anywhere to live, I always felt safe because Mom was there. Your aunts and uncles say they're worried about you. What do you think about that? Lily's jaw set in a way that made her look older than 9, made her look exactly like Sarah when Sarah had decided something was worth fighting for. I think they weren't worried when we were living in the parking lot. They weren't worried when Mom called asking for help and they wouldn't answer. They're only worried now because Great Uncle Nathan left us money and they want it. But it's not theirs. He left it to us because Mom is a good person who deserves good things. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket, the edges worn like she'd been carrying it for weeks. Great Uncle Nathan left me a letter. He wrote it before I was born, before he even knew I'd exist. He said I was brave and that my mom was a good person and that I should protect her because she'd spent her whole life protecting me. He knew what my aunts and uncles would do. He knew they'd try to take everything, and he wanted me to be brave and not let them. She handed the letter to the bailiff who passed it to the judge. The courtroom was absolutely silent while Judge Winters read, her expression shifting from professional neutrality to something softer, almost sad. When she finished, she looked at Rebecca, Kyle, and Emma with eyes that had seen through their performance to the hollowness underneath. Mr. Kane, do you have anything further? Patricia Ortega stood and approached with a television on a rolling cart, the ancient VCR player already loaded. Nathan Mitchell recorded this 6 months before his death, Your Honor. He left instructions that it should only be shown if his heirs faced legal challenges from family members. The tape played, Nathan's face filling the screen, recorded in the vault surrounded by his collection. His voice was steady and certain as he documented his mental capacity, his intentions, his absolute certainty that Sarah deserved what he was leaving her. He'd observed her siblings for years, watched them take while she gave, seen the betrayal coming from a distance that made his foresight seem almost supernatural. At the end, looking directly into the camera, he spoke the words that would hang in the courtroom long after the tape finished. I've watched them for decades. They take. She gives. That's the difference. This collection is mine to give, and I give it to Sarah Mitchell and her daughter Lily. No one else. Blood doesn't make family. Character does. The screen went to static. Judge Winters sat back, silent for a long moment. Then she picked up her gavel and her voice cut through the tension with surgical precision. I've heard testimony from professionals, from community members, from the parent and child at the center of this case. But perhaps the most powerful evidence is this child's testimony and her great-great-uncle's extraordinary foresight. She looked at Rebecca, Kyle, and Emma with an expression that could have frozen water. You stole from your sister. You abandoned her and your own daughter, Ms. Hayes. Yet somehow, a woman you claim is incompetent managed to keep a child safe, educated, and emotionally healthy through circumstances that would have broken many people. And you have the audacity to claim she lacks judgment? Rebecca started to speak, but the judge's look silenced her. Your cousin saw you coming from decades away, and he protected his chosen heir with remarkable care. This court finds no basis whatsoever for your claims. The gavel came down hard. Petition for guardianship is denied. Furthermore, petitioners are ordered to pay all legal fees incurred by Sarah Mitchell in defending against this frivolous action. Any further harassment will result in restraining orders and potential criminal charges. This court finds Sarah Mitchell to be a competent, capable parent who is more than qualified to manage her inheritance and raise her daughter. Case dismissed. The Cedar Falls contingent erupted in quiet applause. Rebecca stood frozen, her carefully constructed case shattered. Kyle's face went from red to white, Emma crying, but whether from guilt or frustration, Sarah couldn't tell. Gerald Thorne gathered his papers quickly, already distancing himself from the wreckage. Sarah pulled Lily into her arms and felt her daughter shaking with relief and residual fear and something like triumph. They'd won. Nathan's protection had held. The wall he'd built around them had proven stronger than her siblings' greed. Outside the courthouse, snow had started falling, fat flakes drifting down to melt on stone steps. Patricia and Robert stood with Sarah and Lily, confirming next steps, but Sarah barely heard them. She was too focused on the feeling of solid ground under her feet, of having fought and won, of knowing that Lily was safe and theirs was a family that courts recognized as legitimate, despite her siblings' attempts to tear it apart. The weeks that followed revealed the cost of victory. Sarah's hands shook when she tried to sleep, her body unable to accept that the threat had passed. Migraines came in waves that blurred her vision, stress manifesting physically in ways that required medication and therapy she could finally afford. The doctor in Helena was patient and kind, helping Sarah understand that trauma didn't end just because the danger did, that healing took time and deliberate work. She went to appointments, let herself cry in offices designed for exactly that, and slowly learned that peace didn't have to be temporary. The foundation planning gave her something constructive to focus on, a way of turning her pain into purpose. Patricia helped structure everything properly. A trust that would generate income indefinitely while protecting the principal, guidelines for how funds could be used, oversight that would ensure Nathan's gift continued helping people long after Sarah was gone. They sold portions of the art collection through Christie's and Sotheby's, each piece finding a home in museums or private collections where it would be preserved and shared. Nathan's patient acquisitions became Sarah's patient giving, each sale generating millions that flowed into the foundation's endowment. James Crawford arrived to build the community center 3 months after the court battle, a veteran carpenter with scarred hands and kind eyes who understood about coming back from war changed. He and Sarah circled each other carefully at first, both gun-shy about relationships. But Lily liked him immediately, and that counted for something. He stayed long after the construction finished, building a life alongside theirs with the same patient care he brought to timber and stone. The Nathan Mitchell Foundation for Single Mothers opened its doors 18 months after the court victory. The community center sat adjacent to the cabin, a beautiful timber structure that honored the forest while providing space for legal aid, job training, counseling services, and emergency housing. Tiny homes dotted the property, each one a sanctuary where women could rebuild with dignity. They hired social workers and lawyers who specialized in family law, created a hotline for people facing abuse, funded scholarships for women returning to school. The work was slow and careful and documented. They helped mothers one at a time, learning what worked and what didn't, building something that would last. 5 years after that November morning, when Sarah and Lily had first walked into Nathan's cabin, over 200 people gathered for the memorial garden dedication. The garden spread across half an acre, native plants and stone paths and benches for reflection. At its center stood a monument carved with words Sarah had chosen from Nathan's letters. In a world of takers, remain givers. In a time of greed, maintain integrity. Build something that outlasts you. Lily was 14 now, taller and more confident, but still carrying that notebook everywhere, still believing in the possibility of home. She stood at the podium in front of the crowd, this girl who'd been homeless at 9 and was now helping run youth programs, and her voice carried clear and certain across the gathering. 5 years ago, my mom and I were living in a car. We had nothing except each other. My aunts and uncles had taken everything we had, and when they tried to take this too, they told a judge my mom wasn't capable. They were wrong. Her voice didn't waver. My mom took what Uncle Nathan gave us, not just money, but trust, the belief we deserved better, and built this, a place where other moms and kids like us can find safety, because we remember what it felt like to be invisible, to be told we didn't matter. She looked at Sarah standing with James at the garden's edge. Uncle Nathan wrote me a letter before I was born. He said to protect my mom because she'd spent her whole life protecting me. But the truth is, we protect each other. That's what family means. Not blood, but who shows up when things get hard and stays when they get harder. Her eyes swept the crowd, landing on the mothers who'd come through the foundation's doors. We're here to tell every one of you, you matter. You're worth fighting for. You deserve good things. Because if we could make it from a parking lot to here, you can too. The applause rolled across the garden like thunder, and Sarah felt tears on her face she didn't try to hide. The foundation had helped 847 single mothers in 5 years, not thousands like some inflated claims, but a real number achievable and documented and growing steadily. 847 women who'd found legal help, housing, job training, hope. 847 children who had stability their parents were fighting to provide. It wasn't everything, but it was something real and lasting, proof that Nathan's careful planning could ripple forward to change lives he'd never see. That evening, after the crowd dispersed and the caterers cleaned up and the sun set purple and gold over the mountains, Sarah and Lily and James sat together on the cabin's porch. The same porch where Sarah had stood 5 years ago, fresh from the courthouse, trying to believe safety could last. The same clearing where Lily had run that first day, discovering what space felt like after 2 years in a car's back seat. The same mountains Nathan had watched for 37 years, patient and eternal and beautiful. Lily leaned against her mother's shoulder, 14 years old but still small enough to fit there, her notebook open to a new drawing. 3 figures stood in front of the community center with people streaming through the doors, mountains rising behind them, the sky impossibly blue and wide. She'd titled it What We Built Together, and Sarah studied the careful detail her daughter had put into every line. "Mom, are you happy?" The question caught Sarah off guard, made her actually consider rather than just giving the automatic yes. She carried scars from those years that would probably never fully heal. The hypervigilance that made her check locks twice. The anxiety that spiked when bills arrived. The dreams where she woke up back in the Ford with nowhere to go. But she had Lily, healthy and brave, and becoming someone remarkable. She had work that turned pain into purpose, that gave meaning to suffering by preventing others from experiencing the same. She had James, steady and kind and understanding about the ways trauma lingered. She had a home, not just walls and a roof, but the actual feeling of belonging somewhere permanently. "Yeah, baby, I'm really happy. Are you?" "Really happy. Like the kind where you're not waiting for something bad to happen." James squeezed Sarah's hand, understanding that particular achievement, knowing how long it took to reach a place where peace felt permanent instead of temporary. They talked about it late at night when sleep wouldn't come, about the way poverty trained you to expect disaster, to save every penny because you never knew when the bottom would drop out again. Learning to believe in stability took time, required evidence that lasted longer than luck, needed proof that good things could stay rather than just visit briefly before disappearing. They sat together as darkness fell and stars emerged, more stars than seemed possible, scattered across the Montana sky like promises kept. The air smelled of pine and wood smoke from the stove inside, clean and sharp and entirely different from the exhaust and desperation of Tacoma's parking lots. An owl called from the forest, long and haunting, and something small rustled through the underbrush, hunting or being hunted in the ancient dance that predated human concerns by millennia. Lily closed her notebook and looked up at the stars, her young face thoughtful in the darkness. "Uncle Nathan never got to meet me, but I feel like I know him anyway." "How's that?" "Because of what he built, the cabin and the collection and all his careful plans. People leave parts of themselves in the things they make." She paused, searching for words. When I'm in the workshop using his tools, or reading in the room he built, or helping someone at the foundation, that's him. That's what he wanted to leave behind. Not just money, but the chance for people to be better than their worst moments. Sarah pulled her daughter closer, this wise, observant girl who'd survived homelessness with her hope intact, who testified in court at 9 with courage Sarah still marveled at, who was becoming someone who'd carry Nathan's legacy forward into futures he'd never see. You know what's amazing? Nathan saw all of this, not the specifics, but the possibility. He looked at us from a distance and decided we were worth believing in, and then he built something that would protect that belief even after he was gone. Do you think he knew it would turn into this? The foundation and everything? I think he hoped we'd do something meaningful with it, but I don't think he could have imagined how meaningful. Sarah gestured at the community center, dark now except for the security lights, tomorrow's schedule already posted by the door. Intake appointments, legal consultations, job training workshops, support groups. He gave us tools. We're building something with them that honors him. James stood, stretched, offered his hands to pull them both up. Come on, it's getting cold and there's hot chocolate inside. With marshmallows? Lily's question was automatic, a ritual they'd developed over 5 years of evenings like this. Is there any other kind? They went inside together, leaving the porch and the mountains and the endless stars behind. The cabin wrapped around them with warmth from the wood stove, light from the solar-powered lamps, the accumulated comfort of 5 years of making this space their own. Nathan's journals still lined the shelves, but now Sarah's nursing textbooks sat beside them, and Lily's school awards covered the wall above the desk, and James's carpentry tools hung on hooks he'd installed with the same care Nathan had used building everything else. Sarah made hot chocolate on the wood stove while Lily set out mugs and James built up the fire for the night, the three of them moving around each other with the easy choreography of family. They settled on the couch with quilts Nathan had made decades ago, steam rising from their mugs. The cabin quiet except for the pop and crackle of burning wood. I was thinking, Lily said, blowing on her hot chocolate, about what I said earlier, about people leaving parts of themselves in what they build. Yeah, I think we're doing that too, not just with the foundation, but here. Every time we help someone, every time we show them they matter, we're leaving parts of ourselves. Someday, maybe a long time from now, someone will talk about us the way we talk about Uncle Nathan. They'll say, Sarah and Lily Mitchell built something that lasted. They took what they were given and made it matter. Sarah felt her throat tighten, tears threatening again. These complicated tears of grief and gratitude and hope all tangled together. That's exactly right, baby. That's exactly what we're doing. They sat together in the warmth, sipping hot chocolate and watching the fire, and Sarah let herself feel the full weight of everything they'd survived and built and become. 5 years ago, she'd been living in a car, convinced she'd failed as a mother, certain she'd never climb back out of the hole her siblings had dug for her. Nathan had thrown her a lifeline she'd been brave enough to grab, and she'd used it not just to save herself, but to build something that would save others. The foundation would continue long after she was gone. The tiny homes would shelter generations of mothers and children. The legal aid program would protect thousands from the kind of abuse she'd endured, and all of it traced back to one quiet man in the woods who'd seen something worth protecting in a woman the world had overlooked, who'd planned his gift with such care that even her siblings' greed couldn't overcome it. Outside, the wind moved through the pines with a sound like breathing, the forest alive in ways cities never were. Snow would come soon, real snow that would blanket the clearing and make the cabin look like something from a Christmas card. They'd spend winter here warm and safe, while mothers in crisis called the hotline and found people willing to help. Spring would bring new life, calves born in the valley, birds returning from migration, women graduating from the job training program and moving into permanent housing. Summer would see the garden producing vegetables, children playing in the clearing, ceremonies celebrating victories large and small. The years would roll forward, carrying Sarah and Lily and James with them, building on what Nathan had started, until his gift had touched so many lives, the original act of generosity would be almost lost in the ripples spreading outward. But here, tonight, in this cabin built by hand decades ago, by a man who'd decided that character mattered more than blood, They were proof that sometimes, rarely, impossibly, the right gift given to the right person at the right time could change everything. Lily fell asleep first, her head on Sarah's shoulder, her hot chocolate mug empty and forgotten on the table. Sarah and James sat quietly, not wanting to disturb her, watching the fire burn down to coals that glowed red and gold in the darkness. Tomorrow would bring more work, more mothers who needed help, more children who deserved stability. Tomorrow the foundation would open its doors and continue what Nathan had started when he decided one broke. Homeless mother deserved a second chance. But tonight they were just a family, chosen rather than born into, bound by love rather than obligation. Proof that the life you never thought you'd be allowed to have could become real if you were brave enough and someone believed in you enough. They'd built this together. Sarah's determination, Lily's courage, Nathan's careful planning, and the community's support all woven into something stronger than any single thread. Sarah looked down at her sleeping daughter and felt something settle deep in her chest, solid and unshakable. They'd made it. They'd survived the war and built something beautiful from the wreckage. They'd proven that Nathan's faith wasn't misplaced, that character could triumph over circumstance. That hope wasn't foolish, even when everything logical said otherwise. The fire crackled softly, sending up a shower of sparks that disappeared up the chimney into the Montana night. In the morning, they'd wake to mountains and possibilities, to work that mattered in a home that was permanent, to prove that sometimes when you refuse to give up and someone gives you the tools to fight back, you can build a life you deserve. Not the life you were handed, but the one you earned by surviving and helping others survive too. That was Nathan's legacy. That was their gift forward. That was what it meant to understand that blood doesn't make family. Character does.